In the early morning hours of November 13, 1974, a heinous event took place in a seemingly normal house at 112 Ocean Avenue in the upscale neighborhood of Amityville, New York. 23-year-old Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., the oldest of the 5 children of Louise and Ronald DeFeo, murdered his entire family as they slept peacefully in their beds. Armed with a .35 caliber Marlin rifle, DeFeo first shot his parents to death before moving through the house to also shoot his 2 brothers and 2 sisters at point-blank range. All 6 murders took place in less than 15 minutes, and somehow no one else in the neighborhood heard the gunshots and no one else in the home was woken up by the shots that were systematically killing their other family members. After murdering his family, DeFeo showered, dressed, gathered his blood-stained clothing and the murder weapon and placed them into a pillowcase, then dumped the evidence in a storm drain as he drove to work at the car dealership owned by his grandfather, where both he and his father were employed. Throughout the workday, DeFeo made a show of calling home and receiving no answer, commenting on it to his co-workers and wondering aloud why his father hadn't shown up for work that day. Upon returning home that evening, DeFeo pretended to have found his family murdered, running into a local bar screaming for help, claiming a break-in had occurred and someone had killed his whole family. It didn't take investigators long to figure out what had really happened, especially after finding boxes of ammunition in DeFeo's bedroom that matched the murder weapon. The murders and subsequent arrest of the oldest son galvanized the community. The stories that followed soon gained international attention. Though there was evidence of conflict between Ronald DeFeo Jr. and his father, as well as admitted drug use by DeFeo Jr., he claimed to have been driven to kill his family by demonic forces that occupied the home at 112 Ocean Avenue. He said that these evil entities told him to kill them all. Ultimately, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was convicted of 6 counts of murder and sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms in prison. Approximately 13 months later, George and Kathy Lutz and their 3 children moved into the home. They were aware of its horrible recent history, but Kathy Lutz later said that this was not an issue for them, saying that the DeFeo slayings weren't something that would bother us. The Lutzes were just happy to find a spacious house in such a good neighborhood for only $80,000. Little did they know that only 28 days later they would flee the house in terror, grabbing only a few of their belongings and heading for the safety of Kathy's mother's house close by. Following their middle-of-the-night departure from their home, George and Kathy contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren with the help of a local television reporter who knew of their work in the field of the paranormal. Ed and Lorraine were a husband and wife team of paranormal investigators. Ed was a demonologist and Lorraine was clairvoyant. Both were devout Catholics. On February 24, 1976, the Warrens paid a visit to the home on 112 Ocean Avenue to investigate the claims of paranormal activity. Immediately upon entering the house, Ed Warren felt an inhuman presence so powerful that he said he felt as if he was standing under a waterfall. He said it felt as if the presence was driving him down to the floor. He called upon the name of Jesus Christ and commanded the entity to reveal itself. He said that he knew then that it was no ghost they were dealing with, and no ordinary haunted house. Lorraine Warren also sensed a demonic presence. She described her impressions of what she encountered in the house. Whatever is here is, in my estimation, most definitely of a negative nature. It has nothing to do with anyone who has once walked the earth in human form. It is right from the bowels of the earth. It was the Warrens' opinion that the house could only be rid of its evil entities by a cleansing, a ritual performed by a Roman Catholic priest or an Anglican exorcist. George and Kathy Lutz had already had one negative experience with having a priest attempt to bless the house the day they moved in. They had asked a local priest, Father Ray Percoraro, to bless their new home. As he went from room to room during the blessing ritual, Father Percoraro was slapped. He also heard a disembodied voice say, "Get out." Following his visit to the house, he fell ill with flu-like symptoms, and his hands also began to inexplicably bleed. Based on this past experience, the Lutzes informed Ed and Lorraine that they would not be moving back into the house even if a cleansing ceremony was performed. Although in the years to come there would be a great deal of speculation as to the validity of the Lutzes' claims about the events that took place in the home, the Warrens never wavered in their convictions that the Amityville house was one of the most evil they ever investigated. They were even convinced that an evil entity from the house in Amityville had followed them home. Ed Warren passed away in 2006. Lorraine Warren has stated adamantly that she would never so much as consider entering the Amityville house again. The Warrens believed that it is entirely possible that Ronald DeFeo Jr. was under the control of the dark forces that dwell in the house at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York when he killed his entire family. Throughout their careers as paranormal investigators, the Warrens saw many terrible things happen that were either directly or indirectly attributed to demonic forces working through humans. Ed and Lorraine were both experts at recognizing such things and were extremely successful at driving them out in most cases. However, they were unable to deal with the evil that existed in Amityville, the evil that they fully believe cost the entire DeFeo family their lives, by murder and imprisonment for life.